Hi, you're on the edge with me, Max Keiser. You know, I take a lot of shots at the U.S. on this show, but it's not because I'm imagining things. It's because the economics over there in the U.S. are actually deteriorating, and it's kind of sad to watch, actually. I'm looking at a story here at zerohedge.com. U.S. drops from first to seventh in average wealth per adult. It's now behind Singapore, Sweden, and France. So as the U.S. tries to grapple with these side issues, they try to figure out if they're Mormon, if they're Christian, or what. They are allowing for their economy to slip through their fingers, and where it all ends is probably a very unpleasant place near the bottom of that league table. Anyway, let's go to Bangkok and talk with John Kim of Smart Knowledge U. John has written a new book, The Golden Gift. Welcome back to On the Edge, John.
Thank you, Max. Pleasure to be back on your show.
Yeah, and just a forewarning, I have a bit of a cold today, so if I sound odd, more than usual, that's the reason why. Now, John, you wrote that the root of all economic discontent in the world is caused by the same thing, an unsound monetary system. Explain.
Okay, I think even nowadays when I talk to just friends and I say the monetary system is fraudulent and immoral, I would say most of my friends still don't get what I mean by it's immoral. And so I try to use analogies and say, well, if you had a friend that was, say, robbing a convenience store every single day, but they weren't killing anyone, but they were certainly ruining lives by, taking large parts of their wealth, would you be okay with that? And they say, of course not. That's not okay. And I said, then how can you be okay with a bank that robs your money daily? They just do it through a silent mechanism called inflation. And today people think that morality is, equivalent with violence. They think that only if someone like sticks a 9mm Glock or M4 in your face and demands your money, that's immoral. But it's just as immoral to steal your money silently through inflation.
Well, in economics, there's something called moral hazard. And economists talk about this. And there's an idea that you can allow for a little immorality to be part of the system. Alan Greenspan once said, for example, that the specialists on the floor of the stock exchange, even though they trade on inside information, they know the trades that are coming to the floor, therefore they can position themselves ahead of these trades and they can make insider trading profits. It's needed for liquidity. And we hear this all the time. Lord Blankfein said that high-frequency trading, although it's basically stealing, it's siphoning money from the floor of the exchange, he says
Sure.
we need it to enhance liquidity. So there's this idea, John, that there's a little immorality is okay, and it's needed to keep the system operating. Is it your contention that you can operate a system that has no immorality at all?
Yeah, I think so. Because even when we look at the tax issue, the federal income tax, which I don't believe, I really don't support. If you look at, periods before the Federal Reserve came into existence in 1913, I mean, the first income tax was basically levied in 1861, and that was to finance the Civil War. And even then, that was only a 3% tax on all income above $800. And then in 1862, the year after, Civil War is still going on, they needed more money to finance the war, so they raised the tax to include 5% overall income over $100,000. But 10 years later, 1872, from 1872 to 1900, there was zero income tax. And then when the Fed Reserve came into existence, a lot of people don't realize that, the highest tax bracket was still only 7% from 1913 to 1915. But just 5 years later, Max, 1918, the top income tax bracket was 77%. And then as far as the minimum tax bracket, the Fed Reserve raised it from 1% 6 times to 6%. So, we have instances where we don't need this immorality and fraud that, was illustrated in U.S. history before central banks came into existence.
Right. Of course, in 1913, when the Fed was created, they started an income tax, which was presumably to pay the interest on the debt that the central bank was going to foist into the economy. But again,
Sure.
the U.S. has a reputation or a legacy of the lovable rogue, the outlaw. Tony Soprano is a hit TV show. The mafiosos are lauded as examples of good behavior. Even the word Yankee comes from the Dutch to steal, because Americans were notorious for stealing technology from the Dutch going back a few hundred years. So, I mean, America doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with immoral behavior, stealing, larceny, and how do you change that perception? I mean, there's nobody in the U.S. that's standing up for morality. If you stood up and said, the argument being used today, let me put it to you this, John. The argument being used today is that if the U.S. suddenly got moral, the economy would crash, so let's keep being immoral. Now, how do you get over that?
No, it's a load of hogwash. I think the economy would suffer, definitely, and Americans would suffer, but that's the only way to cleanse the system of all the distortions, right? That central banks have induced into the price of capital markets. Because the market's so distorted, you got to clean it out. And it's just a matter of, are we going to go through a period of severe pain in 2 or 3 years, or are you going to stretch it out, which you're trying to do by concealing the truth? And so you get a period of pain for extended period of time, 10 or 15 years. But you still have to clean out the system of these price distortions either way.
Okay, well, one of the byproducts of this monetary system that's at its root immoral is that the wealth and income gap in the U.S. is now at the highest rate it's ever been, including the Gilded Age. So talk a little bit about the monetary system and how it concentrates wealth and power.
Well, I think that it concentrates the power because at the very top of that pyramid are the central bankers, and they're the only ones that really can call exact lows, exact bottoms, and exact tops, because they know exactly when the markets are going to turn, because they're manipulating the interest rates, which in turn affect the pricing behavior in capital markets. So I think I saw a public policy study that stated that the top 1% of the wealthiest families in America captured 70% of income gains within a recent decade. So there's only top 1% gaining 70% of the income gains. And then even the next couple of tiers, I believe it was like the next 9% captured the next, like 11%. So you basically had 90%, left to fight over, the other 80, 90% of income gains that were left. So it is only the very small percent of families that are really getting wealthier under this, fraudulent financial system we have.